calming the storm is found in the Gospels of Matthew 8:23 to 27, Mark 4:35 to 41, and Luke 8 to 8. Jesus and his disciples board a wooden fishing boat on the calm Sea of Galilee. The golden sunset casts a warm glow as they set sail, and Jesus finds a spot to rest in the stern. Jesus, weary from teaching and healing, lies down on a cushion and falls into a deep sleep. The disciples quietly row the boat, chatting about the day's events. The sky begins to darken, and a cool wind starts to pick up. The disciples exchange uneasy glances as the water grows choppy. Huge waves crash against the boat, drenching the disciples with seawater. The wind howls and lightning flashes across the sky as they struggle to control the vessel. The disciples, now soaked and exhausted, begin to fear for their lives. They desperately try to bail water out of the sinking boat. Amid the roaring storm, Jesus remains asleep, undisturbed. The disciples look at him in disbelief, wondering how he can rest at such a moment. In desperation, they shake Jesus awake, shouting, "Lord, save us! We are perishing!" Their faces are filled with fear and hopelessness. Jesus rises, stands at the edge of the boat, and lifts his hand. With authority, he commands, "Peace, be still." Instantly, the wind stops, the waves settle, and an eerie calm falls over the sea. The disciples, still drenched, stare at Jesus in shock and awe. One whispers, "Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The boat drifts peacefully under the now clear night sky. The disciples, still in wonder, realize they have witnessed the power of the Son of God. Their faith in Jesus grows stronger as they continue their journey. The story of the demoniac man in Gadara, found in Matthew 8:28 to 34, Mark 5:1 to 20, and Luke 8:26 to 39. Jesus and his disciples step out of a wooden boat onto the shore of Gadara. The sky is overcast, and the landscape is rugged with tombs in the distance. The disciples look around cautiously, sensing an eerie atmosphere. A wild, unkempt man with chains hanging from his wrists and ankles rushes toward Jesus. His body is covered in scars, and his eyes are filled with torment. The disciples react in fear, stepping back as the man screams. He collapses before Jesus, his face a mix of rage and agony. He cries out, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" His voice shifts between different tones, revealing the presence of many demons. Jesus, calm and commanding, asks, "What is your name?" The demons respond, "Legion, for we are many." The possessed man writhes as the demons resist Jesus' authority. The demons plead, "Do not send us into the abyss." They point to a large herd of pigs feeding on a nearby hillside. They beg Jesus to send them into the pigs instead. Jesus grants the demons' request. The moment the demons enter the pigs, the entire herd, around 2,000, goes berserk. The pigs stampede off a steep cliff and plunge into the sea, drowning. The once possessed man is now calm, clothed, and sitting at Jesus' feet. His eyes, once filled with torment, are now full of peace and gratitude. The disciples watch in amazement at the dramatic change. The herdsmen rush into town and tell everyone what happened. The townspeople arrive and, instead of rejoicing, react with fear. Seeing the drowned pigs and the healed man, they ask Jesus to leave. As Jesus prepares to leave, the man begs, "Let me come with you." His face shows deep gratitude, longing to follow his Savior. Jesus gently tells him, "Go home and tell what the Lord has done for you." The man nods, his heart full of purpose, and goes into the city to share his story. Jesus and his disciples board the boat, sailing away as the man watches, now a witness to God's power. The story of Jesus healing a woman with a bleeding issue is found in Matthew 9:20 to 22, Mark 5:25 to 34, and Luke 8:43 to 48. A woman has suffered from continuous bleeding for 12 years, spending all her money on doctors with no cure. Jesus is walking through a large crowd, surrounded by people pressing against him. Hearing about Jesus, she believes, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be healed." She pushes through the crowd, desperate for healing. She reaches out and touches the edge of Jesus' cloak. Instantly, her bleeding stops, and she feels in her body that she is healed. Jesus suddenly pauses and asks, "Who touched me?" The disciples, confused, remind him that many people are touching him. Jesus insists, saying he felt power leave him, and looks around for the person who touched him in faith. Trembling with fear, the woman steps forward, falls at Jesus' feet, and explains why she touched him. Instead of rebuking her, Jesus gently says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." Jesus tells her, "Go in peace and be freed from your suffering," affirming her healing and restoring her dignity. The people witnessed the miracle, amazed at Jesus' power and the woman's faith. Jesus had just returned from crossing the Sea of Galilee when a large crowd gathered around him. Among them was Jairus, a respected synagogue leader, who pushed through the people with desperation in his eyes. Falling at Jesus' feet, he pleaded, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." Jesus agreed, and they began walking toward Jairus' home, with the crowd pressing in around them. As they moved through the busy streets, a woman suffering from a bleeding disorder for 12 years saw Jesus. Believing that even touching his garment could heal her, she reached out and brushed the edge of his robe. Immediately, her bleeding stopped. Jesus halted, turned, and asked, "Who touched me?" The disciples, confused, pointed out the many people crowding around him, but Jesus knew that power had gone out from him. Trembling, the woman came forward and confessed. Jesus looked at her with compassion and said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Just as Jesus finished speaking, messengers arrived from Jairus' house with devastating news. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Jairus' face fell, but Jesus turned to him and reassured him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Clinging to that hope, Jairus led Jesus to his home, where mourners had already gathered, wailing in sorrow. Upon arriving, Jesus found the house filled with cries of grief. He told the mourners, "Why all this commotion? The child is not dead but asleep." They laughed at him, certain that she had passed away. Ignoring them, Jesus took only Peter, James, John, and the girl's parents into her room. The atmosphere was heavy with sorrow as Jesus approached the still form of the 12-year-old child. Taking her hand, he spoke gently yet powerfully. "Talitha cum," "Little girl, arise." Instantly, the girl's eyes opened. She took a deep breath, and she sat up. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she stood and began walking around as if nothing had happened. Her parents were overwhelmed with shock and joy, barely able to process the miracle before them. Jesus, ever practical and compassionate, smiled and instructed them to give her something to eat. He then told them not to spread the news, though it would be impossible to keep such a miraculous event secret. As the girl ate, laughter and joy filled the once sorrowful home. What had been a place of mourning was now a house of awe and celebration, all because of Jesus' power over sickness and death. Two blind men sit by the dusty roadside in a small town, listening to the bustling crowd. They hear whispers of Jesus of Nazareth passing by, the healer, the miracle worker. Their hearts race with hope. Without hesitation, they cry out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." The crowd frowns, some scolding them to be silent, but they cry even louder, desperate for Jesus to hear them. Jesus hears them, but continues walking. He does not stop immediately, testing their faith. The blind men do not give up. They push through the crowd, following him. Jesus enters a house, and the blind men manage to find their way inside. They stand before him, breathless but unwavering. Jesus turns to them and asks, "Do you believe that I'm able to do this?" Without hesitation, they answer, "Yes, Lord." Their voices are full of certainty. The room is silent as Jesus steps forward, reaching out to them. Jesus gently touches their eyes and says, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." A warm light floods their vision. After years of darkness, they can see. They blink, overwhelmed by the colors and faces they never knew. Jesus smiles but instructs them firmly, "See that no one knows about this." He wants them to remain quiet about the miracle, but their hearts are too full of joy to contain it. Ignoring Jesus' warning, they run through the streets shouting, "We were blind, but now we see. The Son of David has healed us." The news spreads and people marvel at the power of Jesus, the one who restores sight to the blind. The streets of the town were alive with murmurs of astonishment. Jesus of Nazareth, the healer and teacher, had been performing miracles, and the people followed him eagerly, hoping to witness his power once more. Among them was a man who had suffered for years, mute and tormented by a demon that had taken away his voice. His eyes were filled with silent desperation, his movements restless and troubled. The demon within him had bound him in chains of oppression, keeping him from speaking, keeping him from crying out for help. His friends, seeing Jesus in the distance, seized the opportunity. They gently but urgently led the mute man forward, bringing him to the one they believed could heal him. The crowd fell silent, watching in anticipation. Jesus looked at the man, his eyes full of compassion. He could see the torment within, the unseen battle raging inside. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and rebuked the demon, his voice carrying authority that echoed through the air. The unseen force within the man shrieked in silent agony, unable to withstand the power of the Son of God. At that very moment, the demon was cast out, fleeing from the man like a shadow chased away by the rising sun. And then suddenly, the man's lips trembled. He gasped. His voice, long imprisoned, was free. "Praise be to God!" he cried. The crowd erupted in astonishment. Gasps and whispers spread like wildfire. "We have never seen anything like this in Israel," some marveled. Many rejoiced, their faith strengthened by the miracle. But among the crowd stood the Pharisees, their faces darkened with skepticism and jealousy. Instead of acknowledging the power of God, they sneered, whispering among themselves. "He casts out demons by the power of the Prince of Demons," one muttered. Their hearts, hardened by pride, refused to see the truth standing before them. But Jesus did not argue. He simply continued his work, healing, restoring, and bringing light to those trapped in darkness.